it's not a complete shocker, right? Budget phones do well, as you mentioned, outside of the North American market, budget phones do well. So I'm not surprised that they're releasing a budget phone. But it is interesting, like you said, they're copying Google, or they're copying the Pixel line with their A series. They could have come up with something else, but I don't know, like even like an Alpha series or whatever you wanted to call it. They could have called it something else. But it's funny that they kind of recognize that, hey, people know what an A series is, so we're just going to call this the 2A. And speaking of the camera cutout, right? When I saw it, I was thinking this kind of reminds me of a Pixel phone too. Obviously, it's not to the same extent as the camera bar all the way across the back, but it's in the same position that Google has their cameras on the back of the phone, right in the middle. So, right? So, okay, copying the name from Google, copying the camera layout from Google. It makes sense, like you said, to have a less powerful chip because, I mean, at the end of the day, who really needs that much power in their chip, right? Like people aren't doing anything that intensive with their phones. A lot of the power and the benchmarks that we see from chips now, it's like, it's really just to have bragging rights. Phones are so much more powerful than we need them to be. So if you can save money on a budget friendly phone by making it less expensive, then yeah, why not do that? You mentioned the MediaTek chip, and they kind of like have a whole teaser video about, how they're going to be using this MediaTek chip and how good it's going to be. But it's like, it's a budget chip. Like, you don't need to do all this hype for a budget chip. And also, 12 gigabytes of RAM seems like a bit much for a budget phone. If the whole idea is that, like, we're making a less powerful chip because you don't need all that power and we're going to make it less expensive, then why throw in the 12 gigabytes of RAM? But I don't, maybe cost wise, if you have a less powerful processor and more RAM, then it equates to the same performance as, a higher power chip. Maybe they've done their tests and 12 gigabytes doesn't cost that much more, but it gives you better performance, I guess, hopefully. But it would be nice if this came to North America because yes, there definitely need to be more budget options. And I think, as you mentioned, people like what Nothing has done in terms of the phone designs, in terms of the UI designs, and all of that sort of, the operating system. They like that stuff. So I think if you gave North Americans another opportunity to experience that, and you didn't have to pay for the full price of the phone two, of the Nothing Phone 2, I think people would appreciate that. But I mean, we'll see when it officially gets announced. I think Nothing has an event on March 5th. So I think that's when the official reveal will happen, right? Because they've said they're coming out with this phone. They've said the chip is coming out. I'm sure maybe like within the week they're going to talk about, oh, these are the cameras. This is the camera sensor that we're using. Because Carl Pei, just like OnePlus, they do a lot of like leaking and teasing before the actual event. So you get a lot of the specs of the phone before the actual launch event. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see something about the screen they're going to use, or we see something about the cameras they're going to use. Some more information before March 5th is probably going to leak. The main thing is going to be how much is this going to cost, right? Is it going to be similar in price to an A series Pixel phone, to an FE phone from Samsung? Like you're a new entry into the phone space still, and like a new entry into the budget phone space. So are you going to be competitive price wise also? Hopefully. I would still want the flagship specs moving forward. And even with the iPhone that I use now, like I've had it for, I guess this is the second year I've had it now. And I've noticed it slow down with things. And whether that's the actual phone slowing down, which I'm sure it is because my battery health is, I think, at like 85% now. So probably should replace the battery. So whether it's the battery slowing down performance, or whether it's apps keep on getting optimized for the newest chip, so now they're running slow. There are some apps that I notice, and it's not even all the apps. It's like specific apps that I notice where it's, I tap something and it takes like an extra second to process. And I'm trying to scroll and it takes like an extra second for the app to realize that I'm trying to scroll. Like I said, it's not every app, it's specific apps. So maybe even those apps, if I had a newer phone with a newer chip, maybe they would still act the same way. There are some things that I notice performance wise already, so I don't think I could go to a more budget chip. I think that's one thing. Like, you said flagship. I have the 13, so it's not a ProMotion display. It's not 120 hertz, right? So I would much rather have a better chip than a better screen. Like, I don't need 120 hertz. I don't need a 144 hertz screen, which some Android phones have, right? With like a 366 hertz touch sampling rate. I don't need that. I just need a 60 hertz screen. Give me a fast chip, so when I'm doing things on apps, there's no lag that way, and I'm fine.